Hi, Dr. Amy. Thank you for joining me today. I'm thrilled to be talking to you from Chicago. Am I right?
Yes, you are. You can hopefully see the snow behind me.
It's stunning. I'm
I'm
almost
jealous of you
jealous.
and your tank top, and I'm jealous of you and your tank top. I'm like, oh,
Mutual envy.
right,
I-
exactly.
I'd love to start by asking you what inspired you to become a clinical psychologist, is it?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. So I come from a long line of, I guess, people in the healing profession. I don't like to say healers because I believe that we actually have the power to heal ourselves with someone who is alongside of us to help guide us through that. So my grandfather was a pediatrician. My uncle's an orthopedic surgeon. My father's a dentist. So everybody is in sort of a helping profession. And it actually was not my path at all. I thought I wanted to be a consultant when I graduated college, even though I was a psych major in undergrad. And I had really high ambitions of being a consultant at a big consulting firm, even though I didn't even know what that meant at the time. It just looked like it would be a great job. And I ended up not getting a job and sort of started down this existential crisis, which lasted about 2 years, where I took a job in radio advertising and was pretty miserable. I sold airtime, it felt meaningless to me. And then I took a year off and I actually waited tables to try to figure out what exactly I wanted to do. And at that time, while I was waiting tables, which was not an easy thing for me to do, I went to University of Michigan. Here I had this really great degree from a great institution that was a very expensive degree to have, and I was waiting tables. And so I was really trying to make sense of those two things in my mind, is like, how could I have this degree and I'm not to undermine waiting tables, but it sometimes doesn't match up. And so I really struggled with that. And actually, it was the best thing I could have ever done. I think I want my children to wait tables. I think it is the best opportunity to really learn about people and to learn how people work and to learn how to manage your feelings and anxieties around people. I used to like wake up in the middle of the night being like, oh my God, I forgot the ketchup. Like I forgot the ketchup for table 31 or whatever it was. So it ended up being a phenomenal kind of training experience for life. And then also at that time, I decided I was going to volunteer at what was Children's Memorial Hospital in Chicago. It's now Lurie. Um, and just get my feet kind of wet in the field of psychology. And so I worked in their partial hospitalization program for kids and really started to get a sense for what it meant to work therapeutically with people. And at that time, I also started applying to grad school. And so that's sort of how I got into this field. Was I knew I wanted to do something that was really helpful to others and that was healing to others, but I wasn't exactly sure what that was going to look like. Also through my own therapeutic journey, I think helped me at that point decide that that's really what I wanted to do.
That's wonderful to hear. I particularly am leaning into the part where you decided to pause and wait tables. And I think a lot of people feel that we have to go from one thing to the next in life. And if we don't know that that's not okay. And I work with a lot of teenage girls, especially, who come to me in year 12, which is their final year of high school here in Australia, and with the anxiety around not knowing what they want to do. So it's a normal feeling, isn't it, that we can all have, of not knowing what our next step's going to be.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I think the fact that we are expected to know at that age is really where the issue lies, right? Like that time should be about self-exploration. It should be about what lights me up, what excites me, what interests me, and can I follow that thread a little bit and see where it goes? And I think I really identify with those teenage young women that you're working with, because I had a panic attack as the senior in college when I got a rejection letter. And I remember exactly where I was standing and thinking, oh my God, how am I ever going to have a career? I can't even get a job. And what is this going to look like? And what am I going to be? And there's all this angst that sets in and anxiety about how am I going to support myself and how am I going to support a family, and I think it's very real, and I think it stems from the expectation that we should know that at that point in our lives, at the age of, I don't know, 18 or 22 or whatever it is, you need to know what you're going to do for the rest of your life. That is a daunting undertaking.
I 100% agree with you. And I love the answers my girls give me when I ask them the questions and they go, I don't know, Mum. And I'm like, I love the I don't know. Like, it's okay not to know, because I do think, especially now, there's a lot of pressure to have to know what you want to do when you want to do it. And that impacts our emotional well-being and our mental well-being significantly. And I know that emotional wellness is a priority in the work that you do. And I'd love for you to share with us, why do you believe emotional wellness needs to be prioritized?
Well, when I think, a lot of, I don't know if they call it the same in Australia, but here it's called mental health. And I sort of I like the idea of emotional wellness. I think that there's certainly a stigma attached to mental health problems, people call it, right? Mental health issues. And I really want people to think about emotional wellness as part of a practice of overall wellness. And I don't think that you can separate your emotional health from your physical health. They mind body goes hand in hand. It is so important to be tending to our emotional being. And I think of it like exercise. People go to the gym, maybe they work out in a small group, or they have a trainer, or whatever it is. People go to their doctor, people, they invest in all different areas of their life, and then they don't think about their emotional well-being. And it's shocking to me that it doesn't start with that, because if that isn't, especially right now, you guys are not in the lockdown, because I think you've handled things a bit better than we have over here. But I think now, we're seeing what happens when people's emotional well-being is not at the forefront of how we're thinking about things, and people just can't sustain sort of the weight of everything, in addition to trying to keep emotionally healthy. And I think that when people said to me in the beginning of COVID, when we were locked down really early, oh my gosh, how are your patients doing? What's going, they must be really struggling. And I said, actually, they're doing probably better than the majority of the population who isn't in treatment, because I sort of likened it to, it's like, we have a Super Bowl here, which is the final tournament of the football team. It's like showing up to the Super Bowl, never having practiced or played a game in your life. And that is sort of what this experience of COVID has felt like, is that so many people showed up because they had never gotten mental health treatment before. And then they're struggling because they don't have the skills in place, the coping skills in place to manage. And so I think if you can learn the coping skills, it's amazing that you're working with young women, and even earlier on, kids, teaching them emotional regulation, teaching people to recognize their emotions, teaching people to use their words to express themselves rather than finding other vices to manage those feelings, is how we move towards emotional wellness as a population.
I love that you touch on the fact that your clients that you work with have been preparing for this. That's something that I've been talking about within my own community, and I've had the same experience with my clients actually being able to navigate this, because they had been taking the time to prioritize their emotional wellness. Through COVID here in Australia has been the same as yourself. Those who have been taking the time to prioritize their emotional and mental well-being have really been navigating this with a sense of calm and real trust in the tools that they use in their daily life, and now seeing that when we're being tested, that it's actually holding them and keeping them grounded and centered, which has really been wonderful to witness. And that was a conversation we had in our family at the beginning of March last year, which was when we were affected, about prioritizing what was important to you with looking after your mental well-being, social as well, physical and emotional, and that looks different for everybody in my family. And so that was a really helpful thing for us to actually lean on during that time. So I love that you touched on that, because I think it's still really important, perhaps not in Australia as much as other parts of the world right now, because we are progressing really well. But if I could ask you, if there are a couple of tips that you could share with anybody that's listening today that could be struggling, what are you guided to share with us with regards to that?
So I think reaching out for help obviously is important. And I recognize that not everybody has the resources for a therapist, but there's so many platforms out there now that allow for support, online platforms and things along those lines. And I think I certainly know here, obviously it's different there because you guys are out and about and not locked down anymore, but isolation has been huge for people. And I think just we're social beings. So connecting with people if you're struggling is important. And even saying, yeah, I'm having a hard time, can be very freeing, because it then allows other people to see you and it allows you to be seen. And I think a lot of times people feel like they're just not seen, or no one's hearing them, or no one's listening to them. And so they don't know where to go, and it feels very lonely. And I think that when we can connect with other people, that's when we can really start to begin to heal. And there are lots, again, I don't know the setup in Australia, but I know here in the States, there are community mental health centers people can reach out to, obviously hospitals, even a friend, like if you have a friend who might have seen someone, or through insurance. Again, I don't know how things are set up in Australia, but in the States, insurances have places you can um, reach professionals. So I just feel like there's many options right now to try to get help. And again, here in the States, so many things are available telehealth wise, that it gives people who wouldn't if you have internet access, who wouldn't normally have access to treatment, can now perhaps connect with a provider that they really feel can help them.
That's fantastic. And even just taking that first action step of reaching out to someone or sharing what you're feeling can have such a positive impact on how you feel about yourself, and may be just what you need to do. And then if you need extra support, I love that you have access to all those sorts of community resources that can help someone. And we do have that here in Australia as well. We have a few organisations, and as well as I think podcasts are a wonderful way for people to actually gain access to professionals like yourself if they can't afford, because most people have a phone or internet access these days. And that's what I love about this forum of podcasting, is that you can find people like yourself. And you have a beautiful podcast called Life, Death and Space Between, which is where I discovered you on the John Holland episode, which is episode 94 for anyone that's listening. So I'm curious, why explore this specific topic on your podcast show?
Yeah, so how much time do we have? So my sort of simultaneously, when I was in college and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, when I was a freshman in college, I lost my aunt. She was 48 years old. She had complications from diabetes. I had just started college, and she was waiting for a pancreas and kidney transplant. And in order to get the transplant, her body needed to be in the best shape possible for them to put her on the list, because if she got an organ, they wanted to make sure that she was going to be okay to withstand the transplant. When they did all the testing, they had found out that her heart was actually not strong enough to withstand the transplant. So they went in and they did to do open heart surgery, and she ended up dying on the table. I got the call at college. I think many people who've experienced loss in their life in a tragic way remember that call or knock at their door, whatever it is. And so it really sent me on a journey that luckily I didn't have to travel far for. She actually came to me. And so it actually happened sooner than I had anticipated. I never had thought about it, but when I think about sort of the first time she came to me in my mind, she had come to me before then, and I didn't recognize it as what I now know as a visit, was an after-death visit. So when I was in grad school, and her experiences in life shaped, and her experience with death hugely shaped who I was. And part of what had driven me and made me feel like it was so important for me to get a job was her own experience, having taken some time away from the workforce when she was starting a family and then really struggling to get back into it after a divorce that then led to her becoming sicker because of the stress and the diabetes and everything. So it was really the spiral for me. And when she came and visited me, it was in a dream state. I was asleep, but it was sort of in that in between state where you've woken up and you kind of fall back to sleep. And she came to me, she gave me 3 very clear messages about my mom, about my uncle, and about her son whose wedding was coming up. And if people want to hear, they can listen. I tell the whole story on my podcast. And from that point forward, I was just floored. And I knew that there was something else to life, but I wasn't quite sure what it was. And it really sent me on a whole different journey of exploration of death and what happens to us when we die, and can we connect with loved ones who have crossed over, which is pretty unconventional for a therapist, a traditional therapist. And luckily I had a supervisor who was very interested in all of this and also very scientifically grounded. And so she encouraged me to explore and to open up. And over the course of almost 20 years, I went on my own journey of really practicing mediumship for a while and bringing people into my life who wanted readings and seeing how that went. And it started happening with patients where I would start to get information from their loved ones. And so I didn't really know what to do with that because I'm a trained therapist, not a medium. And my podcast is sort of it is the birth of all of this. It is me bringing into the world my own exploration and hopefully helping other people to see that when we die, our physical body dies, but maybe our consciousness still goes on, and that life is not the end when we take our last breath. And so this has been my true baby, and my true passion has been exploring this and opening other people up to these possibilities of what happens when we die, what happens when we cross over, what happened before we got here, how can we stay connected to our loved ones, how can we continue those relationships, and again, also looking at it from the lens of you still have to be a human in a human body, and you still have to grieve. Like there's no getting around those things, but that maybe grieving can look a little bit different if you are open to these possibilities.
That is a wonderful way to experience your introduction to spirituality, isn't it? To experience it firsthand. And I find in my own experience that is what happens to a lot of people who become more conscious at a certain stage in their life. So what I'd love to know is did you always know that you had intuitive abilities in this way? Or is it something that just awoken in you once your aunt passed away?
So I would say, as much as I talked about sort of the men in my life who were in the healing profession, my grandfather, my uncle, my father, the women, my grandmother and my mother, I would say were very intuitive, not in a connecting with the other side, but in a ability to read and get people, both of them. Like they can just zero in and they just have a sense of people. And so that was more how I saw my intuition when I was younger. I didn't see it as the ability to connect with, I don't come from a family of mediums or anything like that, where I know a lot of people do. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm not maybe practicing it is because it's not as natural to me. It doesn't feel like that is where my calling is, for lack of a better word. It feels like it really is around teaching other people to open up and also to connect, because I believe, to your point, I was lucky enough, and it does feel sort of lucky, that I had this, what's called a spiritually transformative experience that sort of catapults you into spirituality in the way that I was catapulted. But you can also cultivate it in meditation and sound baths and connecting in nature, and they are all ways to connect to your soul. And ultimately, that is what I feel like my aunt has helped me to do, is connect more deeply to my own soul and to my own essence, so I can live that in this lifetime. Because I don't think that she did not live that. She was a very physically sick woman, and I think that she has, through me, been able to teach me how to really live in her death.
I feel like our experience is mirrored. It's wonderful. We're kindred spirits, because I had a similar experience once my grandmother passed away, and in that she connected with me in a way that I had never experienced before. And I knew, just had an inner knowing, that she was orchestrating all these experiences that were happening for me. And I also believe that she didn't get the chance to live the fulfilling life that perhaps she wanted for herself, and that she had this opportunity now to do that through me. And I still feel like that's the experience. That's what feels right for me. And so do you believe that we can all connect with past loved ones that have passed away?
I do, but I think you have to work at it. So I think that, first of all, if you have a lot of emotional stuff going on, it's going to be harder, because I like to think about it as like it's a vibrational frequency. And so when you're really stuck in sort of what I call, people deem negative emotions, I don't really like seeing them as that way, but anger or fear or jealousy, or not jealous of just the fact that you're in a tank top and I'm in a sweater and there's snow outside. But like those deeper feelings of just, they're lower level emotions. And it's not a judgment. It's not, it's just sort of laying it out, that it's harder to energetically connect to something bigger, because their vibration of the other side, vibration of your own soul, has to meet your vibration in a physical body. And it can't do that when we're stuck. When people are grieving and they're really stuck in that heavy, kind of thick, mucky, almost like quicksand feeling, right? That any moment you're going to be sucked in by your emotion, it's going to be harder to connect. Meditation is a great way to start opening that portal. But I also think that people often expect that there is like this moment of, the skies opening and angels singing to you. And sometimes that's the case, but sometimes it's much more subtle. And the shifts in energy are very, very subtle. And so if you're very caught up in everyday life, if you're not practicing some sort of mindfulness, if you don't have some sort of mindfulness practice, it's going to be hard for you to see when we are getting signs or synchronicities from the other side, because you're not paying attention, or you're expecting it to be something different than it's going to be. And you can ask, certainly, you can say, I would love for, I've said before, like, I'm really struggling right now. Can someone, anybody, show up for me in a way that I will clearly recognize? And then it does. And then I know, okay, there are forces. I don't understand it fully. I know that quantum physics has some way of trying to explain it, but the world then becomes like a miraculous place, and things just happen, and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. I set up my life for this to happen in this way.
I think there's more and more people shifting in the world and starting to ask questions and starting to notice these synchronicities and these unexplained experiences and starting to wonder. And I think wonder's a really great place to start. And with respect to the clients that I work with, I really encourage them to just follow their own curiosity. And because for everyone, I'm noticing that experiences are different. And so if you just follow your curiosity, if you love to spend time out in nature, perhaps nature's where you need to be for you to connect. If you love to meditate, perhaps meditation is your choice of, I guess, it's of opening the portal. Or it could be exercise. For me, all three of those things help. And when I put them together, it's even more powerful. So I guess the best way I can explain that is if I get up in the morning and get the chance to meditate and get out into nature and move my body, I actually have more energy. So my vibration is raised. And then I feel that my creativity is more open. And creativity for me is the same as being inspired or connecting to your intuition. I think many people, there's different terms that we can use, and for me, I'm starting to discover that it's the same thing. So if you're feeling creative, that's your inspiration flowing through, right?
Yeah, I think creativity is just the language of the soul, and how that gets expressed looks different for everybody.
And so what is your view on creativity and its link to wellness?
Well, I think that I mean, how do you define creativity? Like, for a really long time, I didn't think I was a creative person because I don't play an instrument. I don't do art. The things that are typically viewed as like creative outlets weren't there for me. And then until I started expanding my thoughts on creativity and almost playfulness, like, where are you playing? And that's where I think that well-being comes in. With kids, we spend a lot of time, kids play. That is their language, right? And as we get older, we move away from that playfulness. And in that play comes their creativity. They're imagining, they're dressing up, they're being whoever they want to be or whatever they want to be. And the older we get, the less we play and the less creative we are. And so I think that when we can tap into that, we can let go and we can free ourselves. Even when I'm in therapy with people, oftentimes what I'll say, which taps into creativity, even though they don't realize it, is let's just play with that idea. Let's just play with that in your mind. Like, what would it be like to have the job you dreamed of, or, find the partner you always imagined, or live the life of travel and, whatever it is. No matter where you are in your life, to have that playfulness and that ability to imagine, and then start to think about, how can I begin to manifest this? How can I begin to really sit with that as a possibility for myself and bring it into reality? And then it becomes really powerful. And that's how I see psychology and spirituality really coming together. It's not that you magically think of something and it happens for you. I mean, maybe there's people that happens to. I don't know. I think it's hard to
Sometimes it happens to me that way.
But you're probably doing something that is moving and shifting your energy in that direction.
Yes.
Right? You're not sitting on your couch doing nothing. And
no, for me, it's about being proactive.
Right.
And being proactive in the way that I take care of myself, in training my mind on a daily basis, doing the things that I know are going to help me live a more meaningful life. And then sometimes I'm already in that position and something will happen, I will manifest it instantly. And I'm playing with that at the moment. It's a really fun thing to play with. And from a point of view, like, I watch my daughters play sport and I'll ask the universe, wouldn't it be wonderful to see my daughter score a try in this corner, and get really specific in the next 2 minutes? And then it happens. And then I'm like, oh, okay, let's try another one. And so encouraging
But it
just
wouldn't
that.
happen if she wasn't on the field.
That's
Right.
right. So there is
And-
that. You have to take action,
Right.
and we are connected
Right.
energetically as well. That's
Right.
I think that's really important to talk about. But I love the idea of playing with manifesting, and not just around the idea that the norm is about money. I think manifesting incorporates every area of our life. So whatever's important to you right now, to perhaps focus on using that energy to create what it is that you want, and then take the action steps to lead yourself towards that, and let life meet you part of the way as well.
Right. And my mentor, when we work on this, we always talk about sort of co-creation from a place of internal versus external. So
Nice.
manifesting money, fine.
Mm-hmm.
But why are you manifesting the money?
Mm-hmm.
What is that? Some people say abundance, but what is that really going to give you? Because when you come from a place of, I want money because I actually really want security or freedom or health, access to health, good health or good food, that's a very different place from I want money for the sake of money.
True.
And then how it shows up for you can be in all sorts of ways that might not be dollar for dollar, but that give you exactly what you need, even if it's not in the way that you thought you would get it.
I think to manifesting your soul's desires is something that we can do more easily, rather than manifesting for the sake of manifesting. Say, you have a goal that doesn't resonate with me at all. And I think, well, I need to resonate what Amy wants in her life. If that connection is missing, then because it's not linked to my soul's desire or my soul's need to have that experience, that I think it makes it harder to be able to manifest that. So for me, I had to get real around what is it that is actually going to fulfill me. And I noticed it was connection and relationships and positive experiences from a moment to moment basis during my day. And so I really brought it back to really small moments, and that's completely transformed my life. So I can't explain that. It was just about getting real with what felt right for me.
Yeah. And I say, what I talk about is your essence. So how you're tapping into, people use purpose a lot. I'm like, so I don't like conventionality. So I like to always make my life more difficult and find something that's not purpose, but sort of like purpose. So I always talk about essence, and how are you living your essence, living what feels in alignment with your soul. And then you can live your purpose, but you can't live what you think is purpose without knowing what the essence of your soul is here to express. Does that make sense?
That's a beautiful way to explain it. I love that. Essence is a wonderful word to just capture our being, our sense of being.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And so what does living your essence look like for you?
Gosh, I'm still working on it. I think I'm really right now in a big shift in terms of I think my podcast was a big step for me to step out and to live in my essence. To be out teaching, I think, is a big thing that I've shied away from, and to be teaching a lot of what I'm talking about on this podcast, and really helping people on a larger scale integrate these concepts into their everyday life, and helping people fear death less, helping them understand death. I'm very clear that I'm not here to help people in their grief, although I think that that's a piece of what I do because of what I talk about on the podcast. It feels to me like I'm very much here to help people live, to live their own essence. And for me, that's a lot about connection. It's a lot about community. It's about family. It's about love. Ultimately, I see the words, the letters behind you. But when I am in alignment with my own soul, those are the feelings I'm experiencing when I'm with my family, when I'm with my kids, when I'm with my siblings and my parents, who I'm lucky enough to have amazing relationships with and have really cultivated those pieces. And when I'm active in my community and making a difference, and when I'm helping my patients on their journey of healing, that's when at the end of the day, I feel like this was a great day, because all of those components fed a part of my soul. And when I'm taking good care of myself, which people are always like, how do you manage everybody else's emotions? And I really do put my own self-care above everybody else's, above my children, above my husband, above anything else. If I am not happy, nobody's happy. And so when mama's not happy, nobody's happy. And so I make that a priority. And I do, some people would say it's selfish, but I do spend a lot of time doing things that fill me up and that are important to me. So I don't feel resentful of anybody else in my life and them needing me to be their therapist, be their mom, be their partner, be their representative for the school board or whatever else I'm involved in. Because those are all choices that I've made, and I can't resent other people for choices that I've made in my life. If I'm not taking care of myself, that is likely how I would feel.
I love that you touch on the fact that self-care is a priority for you, and I think the word selfish is a positive word.
I do too.
and only through my own experience have I gone from being that mum who was the martyr and did everything for everybody else, and then had nothing to give, and that was my turning point to how can I show up as this amazing person that I want to be for everyone that I come into contact with, if I don't take that time to pour time into my own self. Because my aha moment was realizing that I've been put on this earth to live my best life as well as every other human being here. Not to put myself last so that everybody else can live their best life, and that my children are going to learn from me if I'm actually taking those steps to go for my dreams, to do all the things that are important to me. That's how they're going to give themselves permission to do that for themselves. So I love that you talk about taking the time to do what you need. So how does that, in a practical way, what does that look like for you? Because I know a lot of the listeners will go, well, some people will be like, I'm just too busy to do any of that. So what does that look like for you in a practical sense?
Busy is a loaded word, right? And I think that people make themselves often busier than they need to be. And that means that they're taking on more than they need to take on. And I take on a lot, and I have a lot of people say to me, I don't know how you do everything that you do. And part of it is, I think, meditation helps. So what my day looks like just to give you an idea, this morning I woke up early because I knew that once my day got started, I would not have time. So I woke up and it was funny because my husband, last night I was like, what time are you setting your alarm for? Because he had a call early this morning. He's like 6:30. I'm like, perfect. So I was up at 6:30. I was on the bike doing my exercise, and then I started my day. And so for me, that's a big piece. I also had a call with my mentor today. So that was another thing that was in there. And I knew that we were going to do a meditation during that call. So I didn't do a meditation earlier, which I normally would try to fit in, because I knew I would have the time later to really tap into that piece. And I think that for me, that was enough for today. And I'll take a bath tonight, every single night. That is my big self-care ritual, is just Epsom salts in a tub. And I think over the years, my kids have learned this is what our parents do. My husband also works out a lot. and that's his outlet. And so there's not like an expectation that we're going to drop everything for our kids. If they need, they're older now. I mean, this was not the case as much when they were younger, but it certainly is like a training process, right? You have to train your children too, to know that this is time for you and you're taking time. When I used to be able to go out at night with girlfriends, that was an important thing for me to do, is to have a book club or some outlet where I could connect with other women for fun. Obviously, my job is pretty isolating because it's just me and a patient, so I don't have that interaction that people get at work. But I think just, and whatever works for, whatever lights anybody up. For me, it's exercise is a big piece of my self-care, being in nature. So trying to get away periodically when I can, obviously not in this past year. But the time also doesn't need to be hours. It can be, but if you have 20 minutes to take to yourself. I also do things like I listen to books on Audible when I'm cooking dinner, because I love to read, but sometimes at the end of the night, I'm exhausted. And so this is a way for me to get dinner on the table for everybody and also read or listen to podcasts or whatever it is. I mean, there's so many ways to multitask now,
Yes.
which I know some people say is not great, but I can passively listen to a book and be cooking and get out of it something that makes me feel like, you know what, this was an interesting use of time, or it wasn't just, listening to my kids' TV show in the background. It was, again, something that felt like it was for me.
I think that's great. And I think anything that we can do that makes us feel a little bit better and adds value to our life in whatever small way or big way is always going to be something that is like has a positive impact. And that's awesome, right?
Yeah. I mean, even my podcast, like this tonight is fuel for me, right? Because I love it. So I'm going to totally get off this. I had a recording earlier. It got me to this point, and now I'm going to get off this and I'm going to be flying high thinking about our connection and our conversation and what I said and what you said and what your listeners are going to think. And so that's when I think you're living in your essence. It's that none of this feels daunting to me. It doesn't feel like something I have to do. It feels like something that I'm excited to do, that I want to do. Every piece of my day, even picking up my kids from school, becomes something that's great because it's a time to connect with them, driving them. I mean, my God, when I look back at just my day to day, it was like, finally, I'm carpooling again and getting my kids to activities. And so there's that, but which is like, I really kind of enjoyed not having to run anywhere, but I also miss that time where we're alone in the car and I get to talk to my kids.
Yeah.
So
I felt that yesterday as well. Sport is starting back. So school has just started back here in Australia, the beginning of the school term.
okay.
We have a slightly different way of doing schooling. So we start at the beginning in January and go through to Christmas. So our sport follows suit most of the time as well. So I started back soccer coaching last night and I felt the same thing. I was like, here we go. And then I just went, you know what? I'm just going to enjoy my time coaching. And I absolutely feed off the energy of the girls that I coach. And at the end of the session, I just loved it, rather than showing up and thinking, oh, I'd rather be doing something else. Like just using that time to connect, get to know them. And I always learn from them as well. So just paying attention. So, we're all slowly getting back into our normal routines pre-COVID.
I think you guys are back at it a little bit quicker than we are. I mean, this is
possibly.
Yeah. We are very slow.
I think what I've learned is just to be patient during this time that we're all experiencing, because our family lives in another part of Australia and we did have the borders closed. We had a trip planned to go and visit everyone. The borders were closed a couple of days before we were choosing to leave. So we are not impacted as severely, but it's still impacting our choices. So within our states, we have freedom, but if we want to cross the borders, it can change from day to day depending on what's happening with relation to COVID. So I'm just saying to my children really miss their cousins.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said, you know what, we just have to be patient. We just have to be
Yeah.
patient. And when we get the opportunity, we will go and visit.
Yeah, I think patience and being comfortable with uncertainty and flexibility are
Yes.
three. I mean, I know my kids are supposed to go back to school today. They were supposed to, but then we have the unions and it's a whole mess over here. And so, and every day my kids are like, what are we doing? And I can sense their anxiety on one level. And it's like, I could either get caught up in that, or I could use that as an opportunity to teach my kids about patience, about flexibility, about rolling with it, about not knowing, you know, because we don't. I mean, I'm probably going to get an email an hour from now about their school tomorrow. I mean, this is how like sort of minute to minute we're rolling here. And I try to look at that as not, oh my gosh, this is so hard for them. And how are they going to manage this? Because then I'm projecting all of that onto them and then they won't manage. It's really, okay, how can I use this as an opportunity to empower my kids to learn about what it means to be resilient? And if this is the worst that they have to deal with, then luckily we're all healthy. We've been healthy. Then I think they'll be more than okay.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I love that it is really important for us all to be okay with pivoting from moment to moment. And it may be more frequent than what we're used to right now. And I think if we just let go of what expectation we may have around how we want this situation to play out, hope for the best, and just roll with whatever comes our way, then it won't be as stressful as it has been, I think, over the last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have a little plaque. You can't see it because of the way my camera's angled and it's dark. But it says what screws us up most in life is the picture in our head of how it's supposed to be.
Yes.
And I think there's nothing is more true than that.
Yeah.
Right. Even when we're grieving or when we lost someone, we're grieving the person, but we're also grieving everything we thought everything we thought was going to be, the stories we had told, the experiences we had played out, the lifetime we had together, whatever it is. And that's not to say you shouldn't have those dreams and visions as we're talking about manifesting, but that you also recognize that that might not be how it plays out. And that's the piece that's often difficult to overcome, is the narrative that you told yourself about what this life was supposed to look like.
That's a very powerful way to explain that. And I love that. I'm going to use that for myself, actually, when I get, as a parent, we sometimes have that narrative around how we want our children's lives to play out. And so for me, I think I'm going to use that to remind myself sometimes.
Me too. I use it all the time.
It's their life and they get to choose how they want to live it. But there's that crossing over, isn't it, of being in our care and how much say do we have, and and for every family they get to navigate that themselves. So
right.
But I just know that for me, I really would love to give them that space to discover themselves without putting my stuff on them. And as evolved as we like to think we are or we can be, we still have to navigate that.
Mm-hmm. And we have
there's no perfection.
No, and I'm always working on it. And I think that's what it comes back to, is like, how well do we know ourselves enough to know what's getting stirred up in us? Like, I'll never forget when my daughter was, I don't know, maybe she was like 8 or something. And she was talking about how she hadn't been eating breakfast and all this stuff. And I went in my mind and I'm like, oh my God, she's 8 now. She's going to have an eating disorder by the time she's 12. And then by the time and I'm like getting all anxious about this situation that hasn't even happened. And I start asking her all these questions, and then she's getting anxious because she's like, why are you asking me all these weird questions? And it's just because I told myself this story about what was going to happen, because at 8 years old, she didn't eat breakfast for a couple of days, or maybe it was longer than that. And so it was all my own, experiences in mental health and what that meant, and all of these things that got triggered in me that then got projected onto her that had nothing to do with her at all. And I still do it. I'm not by any means saying like I have made it to this place where I never do that anymore. I just think I'm able to catch myself and stop it sooner. So I'm not just projecting onto their little beings.
Yep. I love that. And so before we wrap up, as much as I'd love to just keep talking.
I know, I feel like we've like gone all over the place here. I hope it's okay.
Yeah, I love it. I just trust that what we're meant to talk about comes through naturally, and it will land on the listeners' ears that are meant to hear what we need to chat about today. So with our listeners that are listening today, in what ways do you work with your clients, for anybody that's listening?
I'm getting ready to launch a new program. It's going to be called Live Your Life Backwards. And it is going to be a combination of everything that I really do talk about on the podcast. It's really the merging of psychology and spirituality. So we're going to be exploring some of the basics around meditation and connecting with your soul, where your fears are, where things are blocking you, but also looking at past lives and how those are playing into it. How, what is your soul's purpose here? But also, are you living your essence? So somewhat a lot of what we talked about today, but really boiled down into a really nice package where you'll have the opportunity to learn some didactic work, but also coaching, group coaching work as well, to help move people into a place where they can learn to connect on their own, where they can tap into their essence, where they can live that essence so they feel like they are living an amazing life. Because we all...
exciting. I think that's a really amazing program. I feel like we need that program in schools.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, schools. They need so much emotional work. Oh. Yeah. I mean, I think we need so much in schools around helping kids with emotional regulation and meaning and meditation and all of those pieces. So there's that. And then also my podcast, which is still going. I think I'm on 155 episodes.
Wow.
So I know, it's crazy, and counting, like nonstop recording, and it's been really fun. And you can there explore a lot of concepts around what happens when we die, spiritually transformative experiences, near-death experiences, healing. I have a segment called Ghost Stories where listeners write in and share their own experiences with signs and synchronicities. So it's really an opportunity for people to get their, like you said earlier, to be curious, to dip their toe in and to start to explore some of these concepts and see what resonates with them and see where their interests are.
And I've seen that your last few episodes have been around exploring the different intuitive tools that people can use to connect. So that's a wonderful place to start if you're not sure where to start, because you tapped into astrology. Is that right? Numerology. And what are a couple of the other things that they could listen to if they want to?
So there was astro geography, some people call it something else, and human design, which are all 4 tools you can use. But also, if you want to hear my story, it's at the beginning. I did my story as the first or the second episode, where I'm interviewed by a very dear friend of mine, and you can sort of actually hear how the podcast came to be, because it was through she's a reporter, not an investigative reporter. She's a reporter. And so she was sort of asking me questions. We were on a trip together, and like all of this came out, and she was floored. And I was like, I got to do something with this. And you'll also hear how nervous I sound in my first podcast recording.
Yes. So how is your podcast? How has that changed you? 155 episodes. That's a lot of episodes. I'm into my 50 something. So the 155
you're on your
episodes.
way.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. And it is my way of having these conversations that my soul needs to have.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to be able to record it so that I could share it to empower and inspire and motivate anybody else that is following this path because I had to research a lot, and I don't want that for other people. I want it just to be easy. And
Well, yeah. I mean, I love that, because I think there were so many people that I had followed or read their books or heard their stories or, read years ago, where I was just floored. It was like my first time ever hearing this stuff. And I remember feeling transformed by people's work. Like really just, I have an interview coming up next week with Bruce Lipton, who's an epigeneticist out of California. And I read his work years ago and just thought, oh my God, it just connected. I just connected with it, and it made a lot of sense to me. And so I feel like first of all, it's given me a lot of confidence, because I've been able to reach out to people that I never, ever would have thought would have even spoken to me in my little teeny tiny podcast, and have really amazing conversations that have been inspiring. And I've connected with people and we've remained in contact, which I hope you and I do.
Me too.
Yeah. And it's just been an opportunity to explore the things that I'm curious about. And I think other people are too. And hopefully explore it in a way. For me, authenticity and integrity are really, really important to anything I do. And so I hope that comes through in the podcast, is that I am exploring from a genuine place of curiosity, and that I'm not just kind of pulling off the street like the psychic with the 1-800-psychic sign in front. That I'm really making sure that the people who are on my program are talking about these concepts from a scientific perspective. That's really important, that those underpinnings are there. And I think that it's only, in a lot of ways, it's only reinforced my belief around all of this, that like, yes, there is something more.
I 100% agree with you on that, because I think a lot of people need the proof, and they need the reasoning behind the why. And then there are the others that don't need to, they just trust it. So I think if everyone can have access to, and I think that's why your podcast is so popular, because it's tangible and people can relate. So you're doing a wonderful, wonderful job. So thank you so much for your podcast show. I know people are going to go across from listening to this interview. It was amazing. There's so much wisdom that you've shared with us today. I look forward to re-listening. I like to listen as a listener once we upload the podcast. I like to listen to it as well and always learn more things. So thank you so much, Amy. We will add all your links into the show notes, and your program, if you would like me to add your link for the program, I will add that all in when we release this podcast episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful. I really enjoyed it.